Peace, y'all. This is Marcus Sunjata Brown coming to you with the first in my video series on Osagyefo, Kwame, Nkrumah, who was the greatest African political organizer and revolutionary theorist in the 20th century. So this first video is just going to deal with his background, his origins, his education, his travels in the United States and Britain, his coming of age as a Pan-Africanist organizer and freedom fighter, a fighter for independence from British colonialism. In future videos, I'll talk about the government of the Convention People's Party, as well as some of the efforts of the British, U.S., and other foreign intelligence agencies to subvert the Convention People's Party's government in Ghana, which were finally successful in 1966 in overthrowing the Osagyefo and installing a neo-colonial puppet regime in a pattern that would soon become very predictable throughout the African continent. Okay, so in a number of respects, Osagyefo, Kwame, Nkrumah's life is a microcosm for the saga of African independence in the 20th century. So look forward to more videos down the line dealing with those interconnections. Okay, so Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah was born September 21st, 1909 or thereabouts. There's no official record, but September 21st is the date that is celebrated in Ghana as Founders Day. He was born to a goldsmith father of the Nzima language group and a small trader mother in Nkrumah, which is a small village in southwest Ghana. At that time, it was called the Gold Coast, back when it was still a British colony. Okay, and the Osagyefos' position within Gold Coast society would have been very marginal compared to members of the larger tribes like the Ashanti Nation, right, which had a tighter relationship with the colonial metropole, with Britain, and eventually with the United States than some of these smaller ethnic groups had. So he didn't come from a wealthy family. He didn't come from a well-educated family. It's believed that his father was illiterate, for example, right? And this marginal position in Gold Coast society, it informed his later drive toward national unity in the independence period, okay? He trained as a teacher at the Achimota College, the Achimota Teachers Training College in Accra. He demonstrated precocity at a very young age. He was absorbed in literature. He was absorbed in religious studies, and especially fell under the influence of a charismatic Pan-Africanist and West African nationalist figure named J.K. Agre. Okay, so in 1935, to complete his education, Kwame Nkrumah traveled to the United States, where he attended Lincoln College in Pennsylvania, which was a historically black college, right? There he completed a bachelor's in economics and sociology, as well as a bachelor's in theology. He then went on to the University of Pennsylvania, where he completed an MA in philosophy and an MS in education. So this was somebody who placed a high premium on education, but not just that. He was interested in expanding his knowledge to as many disciplines as possible, perhaps seeking what relevance there was in all of these separate fields for the independent struggle of his people. Okay, he also lectured in philosophy. And he preached at and attended church meetings in Harlem and got involved in debates on Harlem street corners around African independence, around black liberation, etc. Right? This entire time, he's also a working class man. He doesn't have any wealthy connections in the U.S. He doesn't have family members who he can stay with. So he's having to do a lot of menial labor during a really bad time economically for African people specifically, but for the country as a whole, right? This is still the Depression years and trying to crawl out of the Depression years that we're talking about here, right? So in 1943, he actually met C.L.R. James, the famous author of The Black Jacobins, World Revolution, and a number of other important texts, who also was involved in the International African Service Bureau and the struggle against Italian fascism. So he studied under CLR James the concepts of Leninism, revolutionary organization, and it is speculated by an authority such as Ahmad Rahman that in fact he fell under the influence of Raya Dunayevskaya and the humanist strain of Marxist philosophy. Because of his connection with CLR James, he gained entree with George Padmore, who was the most important black figure in the Comintern up until he resigned from the Cominform. The Comintern was the Communist International, for those of you who don't know. Basically, George Padmore was assigned with leading the black working class struggles throughout the world. Okay, so his role in the Cominform was crucially important, but of course he decided to leave the Comintern after a certain turn in their international policy away from criticizing the liberal democracies of the West, which were in charge of, right, which were exploiting, hyper-exploiting the majority of the African continent. Okay, so George Padmore was involved with CLR James at this time in trying to activate a Pan-Africanist movement. Okay, and this entree with George Padmore would prove to be crucially important, as we'll see in just a moment here. Kwame Nkrumah did not abandon his educational work, right? He already had 4 degrees, but he decided to enroll at the London School of Economics for work in anthropology. But he quickly dropped this and moved on to a philosophy degree. He did his work under A.J. Ayer, a famous English language philosopher. And, you know, he was supposedly not that focused on his work, right? Because at the same time, he's involved in all of this debate and organization around African independence in London and in other centers in the British Empire. According to Basil Davidson, Kwame Nkrumah was known as a Hegelian to his cohort and to his colleagues at University College. So he studied Hegel, he studied Marx, he studied Lenin, he studied Nietzsche, he studied a lot of these classical philosophers. But according to Kwame Nkrumah in his autobiography, Ghana, the most important influence during this long sojourn in the diaspora was the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey. Okay, so it's really important to emphasize that for Kwame Nkrumah, it was Marcus Garvey who laid out the blueprint for mass politics and for reaching the masses of our people with a program for an all-African united government. Okay, and this influence was more important for the mission that he had than all of the Marx and Engels and Lenin that he'd studied during this time. All right. So I'm going to end this first installation here. We will resume in the next video talking about his role in the 5th Pan-African Congress and eventually his move into mass politics on the African continent.